Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. Hello, John.
Good morning, sir. How are you going?
The revolution continues.
The revolution does continue. We've had a lot of activity on the cash transaction ban front in the last week and a half, and so I thought it's worthwhile to inform the audience of what's been happening both publicly but also behind the scenes. I've had some very interesting behind the scenes discussions with elements of the coalition, and quite a few of the nationals are nervous about community feedback, and so I think there's an opportunity to potentially split the coalition on this issue, and obviously if we can get the nationals to oppose the legislation internally, that could be collapsing the empire within, so to speak. But before we get to that, I thought there's quite a few public things that we should be alerting the audience to, just so that they may have missed some of the key developments in the last week and a half.
Yeah, there's quite a few things happening. And it's worth saying, I think that a number of people have complained that we're using the term cash ban, right, rather than cash limitation or something, right? But I actually think cash ban is precisely what it is, for certain types of transactions, for certain purposes.
Yes. I mean, the way I've expressed it, I've tried to be careful. It's technically a cash transaction ban, as opposed to, they are not banning cash per se. You can still hold cash, but you have a limitation as to what you can do with that cash. Look, obviously it's slight semantics here, but no, but there is a very important substantive issue on the table, and obviously those who want to downplay our concerns are obviously going to try to pick holes in our articulation, just so that they can try to dampen down community nervousness about this issue and get the legislation through Parliament.
Right, and the implication, of course, is if you are unable to use cash transactions for certain types of things, then you're less likely to hold cash. So in a way, there is an implicit reduction in the amount of cash in the system.
Yes.
Right, coming off the back of this.
Indeed. So where to from here? I thought, why don't we just start with, in terms of the ABC, I think, to her credit, Nassim Kadem has led the way with the mainstream media. She wrote, obviously, a piece last Tuesday that you and I covered in our last show that talked about the actual legislation in the context of the Black Economy Task Force. That led, obviously, to a flurry of mainstream media coverage, and we covered some of those platforms in our last show. I mean, I had a lot of exposure last week personally. I was on ABC local radio, Perth, Adelaide, Alice Springs. I was on News 24 on Tuesday of last week. Also Channel 10. So Channel 10, their online news version, 10 Daily, they interviewed me and they wrote a piece about my perspectives on the legislation. So that was all very good. And then obviously, a whole host of other platforms, particularly mainly print, online, cover the issue as well. So that was, and it all started from our initial set of shows. So that was a good thing. Then what happened was late last week, I have an ongoing dialogue with multiple people in the media, and particularly on this link between negative interest rates and the war on cash. It was a point I continue to make in mainstream conversation, and some people said, again, like, no link, conspiracy theory, etc. So again, to her credit, Nassim Kadem, she's watched our shows, but she said to me, okay, can you show me the sources that you've used on your show? Give me the quotes, give me the links. So I said, there's no problem with that. I mean, Martin and I, this is all public information. So I sent her a lengthy email late last week with a whole host of links to, the IMF papers, to some of the earlier central bank papers that we've quoted, my 2016 column to the Daily Telegraph, etc., and said, well, here's the body of evidence that I've been basing it on. Sent it to her, and then that resulted, and obviously she's been talking to other people doing other research, and then that resulted in a column that was published Monday of this week, where she talked about the IMF agenda around the abolition of cash, and basically said that, and you covered this on the DFA channel. So she said this is not. She mentioned me in the column. She said this is not being plucked out of thin air. There is a legitimate basis for concerns about the role of cash, the agenda around cash, and what happens when central banks want to implement negative interest rates. And again, I went on social media and highlighted this column, and I said, well, again, this is not conspiracy theory. This is conspiracy fact. There is a conspiracy, and it's not a secret conspiracy. It's an open conspiracy by world central banks to eliminate cash so they can usher in, negative interest rate, not just mild, but deep negative interest rates, which is what precisely the IMF has said, that we need to cut rates between 3 to 6% in the next recession. And it's interesting that Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister, was running for the AFR yesterday, saying that a global recession is coming and that the Morrison government is, in his view, complacent. Now, again, another confirmation that stormy economic times are coming forward. And so the question is, well, are we ready for that situation? Even former Prime Minister Rudd said a situation is about to come forward. And my position has always been that in more than 200 years, we are the least prepared for a global economic crisis because we have the biggest debt bubble in the country's history, and households have basically, a lot of households, millions of households, have little to no buffer or slack in their balance sheet, but also in terms of their income flow, that they could actually manage a shock to incomes, unemployment, or even issues with the banking system that would allow them to continue to service their debts and their lifestyle cash flow obligations.
Yeah, and it's worth saying, John, that it's not just here in Australia that this debate's running at the moment, right? In New Zealand, for example, they've put out a discussion paper on the future of cash that came out in June. In fact, there's a closing date for submissions on the 31st of August, so literally today. But Adrian Orr, the Reserve Bank governor, specifically said that negative interest rates are coming and cash is a problem.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely clear and transparent that we're not making this stuff up. This is real, right? This is how the central bankers are thinking, and it's just someone being more transparent than others about what's driving it.
Indeed, and we'll get to it we'll get to it soon. But one point at this juncture, I just want to make is, so within the coalition, certain national MPs who have watched our show, who have received community feedback, who are nervous about negative interest rates, they have gone directly to the Assistant Treasurer Sukkar and said to him, "What's this all about?" And the Assistant Treasurer has said, "This is all about the black economy. This has nothing to do with anything else." So the question is, and you and I had a funny discussion about this in terms of yesterday. Is Sukkar lying? Is Sukkar trying to conceal, or is Sukkar as dumb as Jim Hacker from Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister, where basically all the smart boffins around him are playing him like a violin, and he doesn't actually know what he's actually implementing. So I mean, the Yes Minister series, very famous. I love that show, and multiple times Sir Humphrey was able to trick Hacker into implementing certain things with a Hacker fully recognizing what was going on. And I'm just wondering, is Assistant Treasurer Sukkar, is he Australia's Jim Hacker in the current context?
Well, he's certainly the responsible minister for this specific piece of legislation. So
yes,
he should be across it, and he should be understanding the implications and consequences of it. Yet, as you say, he chooses to deny any connection to the broader issues that we touch on in terms of negative interest rates and the need to restrict cash.
Indeed. So I thought, now why don't we just talk a little bit about in terms of the status of the bill. So obviously we had the Treasury consultation period. Now I went to Treasury yesterday and asked them, because they still haven't released the non-confidential submissions on their website. So I asked them, well, when are you going to release it? They basically said they're still reviewing the submissions. They'll be releasing non-confidential submissions on the Treasury website as soon as possible, whatever that means. Who knows what that means? But we do know that the government has at this stage indicated they will progress. They will be moving forward with a bill. Now, obviously, a bill in the spring sitting. So, and the spring sittings commence on the 9th of September, and obviously they run through to about late November, early December. So in that time period, they need to introduce the legislation. It needs to be able to go through the House of Reps, and it goes through the Senate. Now, what I can reveal to the audience is that in some discussions with some parties in the Senate, certain senators will be pushing for a Senate inquiry. So that's important from a couple of aspects. One is that a Senate inquiry means that it's not going to be rushed very, very quickly. I mean, there'll be a time, maybe 3-4 weeks, where an inquiry will be underway in the Senate. So that's so it's not going to be it's not going to happen within 3 weeks, and it's going to be done and dusted. It could get to the Senate 3 weeks if it goes through the House very quickly, but the Senate will delay the implementation of this law for a while. That's number one. But number two is it gives the public another chance to put submissions forward. And I think for all those people who are just coming new to the issue, who have a concern about this, I mean, they'll be able to put their submissions forward to the Senate inquiry that we expect that is coming, even though they didn't get to put a submission in with Treasury. But also, I would hope that the relevant Senate committee would be having hearings, calling for witnesses. If that were to be the case, I personally would be happy to go in front of the Senate committee and actually provide my in terms of evidence, and hopefully there'll be other witnesses, domestic and international, that the committee would call on, where they could actually hear proper analysis on this issue rather than the spin from the government, and obviously come to a informed view as to, well, what is this really about.
I think it's worth saying also, John, that a number of people I know have emailed their MPs and senators, what have you. My own sense is that sending an email is good, but better is to pick up the phone and call their office, because they get so many emails on so many things that many of them just are not aware of this yet, right?
Yes. We'll talk about tactics soon, but it is. I did have a conversation with a Liberal MP from Sydney yesterday, and this MP has been getting correspondence from the constituents, because his constituents have been sending me their letters and saying, we've been writing to this particular MP. Now, this MP basically has, I know this MP set up, he has his public email address, and he has a private parliamentary email address as well. So he looks at his private one, he doesn't look at the public one. The public one is run by his staff, and they get hundreds of emails a day. And he said to me yesterday on the phone, I'm not aware of what my constituents have said, because we get hundreds of emails a day. So I said to him, you better actually ask your staff, how much correspondence you're getting on this issue, because I know your constituents, certain constituents in your electorate are unhappy about this, and they have been writing to you. So again, just because you send an email, I mean, some MPs do get a lot of correspondence. It gets lost in translation. Sometimes the staff don't actually tell the MP exactly what's coming through the inbox. And having been a former advisor in a Senate office, I'm aware of not every piece of correspondence it comes across the boss's desk, but obviously a phone call and direct verbal communication with either the MP or senator or their staff is effective, more effective as well. But having said that, I would still say it's important to still write to your MP, so that you at least have a electronic record that you have actually put your concerns forward and writing to your MP or senator.
Okay, that's good advice. And in terms of other parties and their positions, what do we know about that?
So obviously we know that One Nation will oppose the legislation. Well, we had Senator Malcolm Roberts on this show saying that they will oppose. We know that Bob Katter will oppose, and I think we talked about that in our last show, so that happened last week. So I do know that Senator Corey Bernardi, so he does a weekly podcast to his supporters, and so I have connections inside his office, and they showed me these recent podcasts in the last couple of weeks where I think some of our viewers contacted Senator Bernardi, and Bernardi said that he would oppose the legislation. So that is what we know now. We know that certain parties, so Centre Alliance and the Greens, have not come to an official position, but discussions are underway, and things are looking positive from our perspective with those parties in terms of the Greens and Centre Alliance, but it's still too early to make any definitive decision. I guess more concerning is that Labor has effectively indicated last week that they will support the government on the legislation unless if something significant were to change their mind. So this is the rhetoric coming from Stephen Jones MP, who's the Shadow Assistant Treasurer, who I personally have met. I met about 3 weeks ago because he lives here in the Wollongong area, and we had he gave me half an hour to put my case forward on this bill. So that's particularly concerning, because obviously if the government and Labor were to support this, well, it doesn't matter what happens with the minor parties on the crossbench, including the Greens, because there's enough senators to push the legislation through both chambers of Parliament. So I know that there's a bit of a campaign on at the moment to try to circumvent the shadow minister and obviously go to the leader, Mr. Albanese, but also other Labor senators and sort of other MPs across the country to make their voice known that this is something that they would expect Labor to oppose. One of the more interesting things that I thought was very concerning from Mr. Jones was his position on cryptocurrency. So, as we've covered in the previous show, digital currency, which is effectively cryptocurrency according to the definition, is exempt from this law. But Mr. Jones said no. In his view, cryptocurrency should be included in the cash transaction ban at the moment. When the legislation goes through Parliament, so he wants to push ahead with that, and obviously, that comment last week in the press has actually concerned the crypto community concerned them quite a bit, and so now we're starting to see some mobilisation in the crypto community to say, well, hang on, so the government says this is safe. We've said it's safe for now because they're going to turn off the exemption at some point soon, and now Labor's saying, well, no, why don't we just ban it right now in terms of $10,000 cash, $10,000 crypto transactions. Now, so we're starting to see action from Alex Saunders, Nugget News, who you've been on. I've been on his show, and a few others, where they're actually now pushing ahead to say, no, this is bad law. We want to oppose this, whether there's a regulation saying it's exempt or not. But one of the other things that I find concerning is, so I had a dinner in late April in Melbourne. So I spoke at a particular seminar. There was a dinner afterwards, and I had dinner with about 10 people. And one of the people who sat next to me he showed me his crypto portfolio, $750,000 in that portfolio that he showed me on his phone. And so obviously, once you're talking about some of these big players with 6 or 7 figures in cryptocurrencies, well, effectively in my mind is, if you bring in this ban, well, what can you do with that crypto other than to go to an exchange and try to liquidate it? Because the whole basis was that you get out of the official system and you can actually use it to transact or to invest or to do whatever the case may be. But if Labor gets their way, they're going to turn cryptocurrencies into effectively digital, what I call digital junk. And you could have a wallet of $750,000 of crypto, and there's not much you can actually do with it. Otherwise, you go to jail.
Well, I also would suggest, John, that even gold is not necessarily exempt, right? There are some interesting discussions I've seen as to whether gold could subsequently also be restricted as well, because, of course, any transactions above $10,000.
Yes. So that is obviously a concern, and that's a point I made in my submission about gold and silver. Physical currency is legal tender. So to the best that I understand, and again, I'm not a legal expert in this area, but gold or silver products that have the Queen's head on it, like a 1 ounce coin from the Perth Mint, that is deemed to be legal tender. But other gold products, like a kilo bar of silver or a kilo bar of gold, that does not have the Queen's head on it, and that's not officially minted by the Perth Mint, that is not legal tender. But that's considered to be an investment product. So there's a bit of a ambiguity on that point, and so this is one of the things I put in my submission to say to Treasury, you need to clarify that point. But the other key point is and again, I didn't mention this, and I don't think anyone's picked this up, is so with investment grade bullion. So what is investment grade bullion according to the tax law? It's gold or silver that's 99.9% pure or above. So it's typically, when you invest in gold and silver, it's either 3 nines or 4 nines, so 99.9 or 99.99% pure. So under the tax code, that if you buy that, that's considered an investment, and you're liable to CGT, so capital gains tax. Now, it's actually the same with cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies is deemed to be an investment, and if you make money off Bitcoin, you got to pay capital gains tax. So I'm not sure if the government and Parliament can have it both ways. If it's money, if it's cash, then there should be no CGT. If it's not cash and it's an investment, well, it shouldn't be a part of the ban. And yet, I think what they're trying to attempt with this is they're going to try to have it both ways. And maybe we need to go talk to some tax experts about this. But I think Parliament needs to have a clear view on gold, silver, as well as crypto. Is it money? Is it an investment? And have a consistent tax, but also a cash ban application across these categories, rather than trying to double dip.
And if you think about this in the context of negative interest rates and trying to keep control of the monetary supply, right? Yeah. What they want to do is to restrict activities outside that process.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So from their perspective, anything which effectively counters that would actually be against their strategy.
Precisely. Yes. So I mean, so I obviously understand why they want potential gold, silver, crypto included in this, because these are mechanisms to get out of the official system. But again, if you're going to do that on the basis that it's money, don't apply CGT to it. So obviously, once there's an opportunity to put in a new submission into the Senate inquiry that I expect to come up, I mean, this is another point that I'll be making and saying, well, even the tax treatment of these gold, silver, and crypto is inconsistent with, is it money, is it not money?
Okay, well, that's so good. And we've touched on the Senate inquiry, but I guess just the other interesting observation in the last couple of days, it was actually on 2GB, wasn't it?
Yes. So absolutely on 2GB. So Alan Jones was able to cover this particular issue. And so obviously he's been getting a lot of correspondence from his listeners about it. And he had Assistant Treasurer Suka on, where he spoke for about 11, 12 minutes on this particular topic. And so, yeah, so very interesting. He was asked, what is this all about? He said, it is all about illegal activity. It is illicit activity. Didn't really focus too much on the tax leakage issue, but he said, no, it's around smashing. He said, there is evidence to suggest that there are greater transactions in cash related to illegal gangs and the mafia and bikie gangs, etc. And we need to give law enforcement more tools to be able to crack down on some of this black economy illegal activity. Now, the interesting thing with that is that they actually had a caller during the Assistant Treasurer being on with Alan Jones, a former federal law enforcement officer with 32 years experience, and he had a particular reaction to the Minister's comments. So let's play that for the audience.
Richard, good morning. The Assistant Treasurer is here, Michael Sukkar.
Good morning, Alan. Good morning, Minister. Look, my background is 32 years in federal law enforcement. This is the worst policy direction you could take. 3 reasons, very quickly. You've already said 96% of small business actually complies. 6% doesn't. The rest is organised crime. You've got $36 billion worth of organised crime. What you need to do is have a RICO Act, like in the United States, Racketeering, Influence, Corrupt Organisation Act. It came in 1970.
Sure.
And when 1970 came in, within 20 years, it wiped out the mafia, wiped out organised crime, and they put together asset seizures linked to it.
Sure.
Now, this country does not want to do it. The Costigan Royal Commission wanted it. The late Athol Moffat wanted it. And Evan Winton, in his book, Our Corrupt Legal System, wanted it. The Barry O'Farrell government was given the advice by Mike Gallagher. Mick Young of the Labor government was to it. They was knocked over. The reason people don't want it, the backers of the Liberal Party, the backers of the Labor Party, they know what happened here in New South Wales. People would get caught. But you will pick up organised crime and you'll take their assets. Minister, don't do this to our country.
Okay,
Well,
Minister.
I mean, the point here is this won't... We consulted widely with small business. There are not many small cafes or small retail shops that accept transactions.
But what he's saying is if you want to eliminate organised crime, why wouldn't you take the American legislation, which apparently has been successful?
Well, I mean, that would ultimately be a question for Peter Dutton and our team in border protection and other places. As a Treasury Minister, I mean, we are trying to support smashing criminal gangs through the tax system or through tax changes. But Richard might be right. There might be a whole heap of other things we can do. But limiting the ability to transfer cash that's been received from ill-gotten
to launder
gains,
money is what
I
you're
think
about,
is very straightforward.
He's saying it needs to be tougher, and I think he's most probably right.
Okay, so that really does suggest that there is something else going on rather than it just being trying to clack down on the black economy.
Indeed. I mean, I thought what this former federal law officer, his name is Richard, what he said, I thought it was significant because here is an expert a practitioner, an expert who has looked at this from a law enforcement issue, and he calls it the worst policy decision that the minister can take. So again, this is not Adams North saying it. There are people who worked in the federal police who said this is not the way to approach this particular problem around illegal activity. And so obviously in that clip he talked about implementing things like the RICO Act, laws to stop racketeering that they did in the United States. And again, that should give Parliament some new evidence to suggest, well, maybe that this is the wrong way to approach it. And I thought the Assistant Treasurer didn't perform particularly well, because he basically said, well, if we're going to do something like RICO, that's for Minister Dutton in Home Affairs, but I've got my little patch, and so I have to just focus on what I have. Now, what you don't want in government is you don't want ministers coming up with thought bubbles and just trying to implement piecemeal solutions. You want Cabinet to have a whole of government consideration about some of these problems and come up with the best package of solutions to that. And it seems to me that at this, with this interchange between Richard and the Assistant Treasurer, it's clear that the Morrison government haven't taken a whole of government approach as to, well, what's the best way to crack down on the black economy, and that seems, again, policy on the run.
And, joined up thinking from government, well, there's a novel idea. I mean, something which absolutely should be there. And I suppose it's also worth just pointing out that the ABC did something, Peter Ryan, and basically quoted information from the ATO on the size of the black economy problem, right? But it was conveniently not directly associated with cash transactions.
Yes.
So the evidence was very skewed and really didn't provide compelling evidence, in my view, as to why the cash ban is the right approach.
Yes. And one of the interesting things around the black economy that Peter Ryan's piece touched on is sophisticated software we can hide transactions. So again, I mean, people are trying to get around tax obligations using sophisticated digital techniques that are nothing to do with cash. And again, the black economy and tax leakage, it requires a multi-pronged approach. And again, if we are to have evidence-based policy, I still haven't seen any direct hard evidence that this law is actually going to have a material effect on the black economy. And again, I'm still waiting on the government, but also because Labor says that they're inclined to support it. Well, where is the evidence that this is going to work? And so I'm still waiting for that evidence. And
just going back to 2GB and the broader questions, because Robbie Barwick from the CEC followed on 2GB as a caller, and he made precisely those same points, that actually this is, if you're looking to try and deal with the black economy, you're looking in the wrong place.
Exactly. So I mean, I spoke to Robbie after he was on 2GB, and he told me all about it, and I thought he had a good run with Alan, and so why don't we play Robbie's contribution on that show?
Rob, hello.
Hello, Alan.
Yeah.
I've launched a change.org petition against this cash ban.
Yeah.
Because we're not buying the reasons for it. First of all, criminals won't care if cash is restricted. They're criminals. They're going to do what they want to do anyway.
Yeah.
The current government should be going after them. The black economy excuse we think is rubbish, because the vast majority of tax evasion and money laundering isn't done by individuals. It's done by big banks and big multinational corporations. And if you want a ridiculous example of this that relates to this cash ban that they're proposing, the biggest money laundering scandals of the last decade were two British banks, HSBC and Standard Chartered, caught out by the American authorities in 2012. Their auditor was KPMG, run by the guy who has recommended this cash ban. The Australian man who recommended this cash ban was the auditor of the biggest banks who laundered money in the last decade. So don't go after individuals. They're going to criminalise law-abiding citizens who just want two things. They want privacy, and they just want the right to not have to use a bank sometimes. You don't want to pay bank charges. If you restrict cash, everyone's going to be exposed to more and more bank charges. And check out, I use a banking app. I'm not a fight of the banks, but check out how much information the banks have on all your personal finances now anyway. It's actually, by old standards, Alan, it's quite scary. And the most important thing, our concern, is this traps people in banks when policies come out that we're very concerned about, like negative interest rates that everyone's talking about now. And the Reserve Bank, the IMF has said we need to have negative interest rates and we need to restrict cash so they work. The Reserve Bank Governor of New Zealand said this a couple of weeks ago. We'll probably go to negative interest rates and we'll need to restrict cash. Our Reserve Bank Governor said we'll look like we'll have to go to negative, we're prepared to go to negative interest rates. And the other one is bail-in, which is being applied around the world, where when banks get into trouble, is that they can take some of their depositors' money to prop them up. If depositors know about that, they'll want to get out of the bank. Well, this kind of thing restricts it and traps people in banks. So my organisation is the CEC. We've launched a change.org petition. It's got over 10,000 signatures in the last week. People, older people who remember what privacy was like, Alan, because unfortunately nowadays a lot of young people, they're just not used to it, right? Older people who remember what privacy was like should tell the young people that they should care about their privacy and not let the government do this. If you want to go after money laundering, go after money launderers. Don't go after law-abiding citizens by taking away their rights.
I take everything you say, and there's tremendous merit in this. And I'll just pull some figures together. I'll say something about this tomorrow.
Well, there you go, Robbie. I think he touched the right points.
Indeed. So I thought it was very good that we're getting more exposure in the mainstream media. And so, today is Friday. I know that one of the weekend programs on 2GB have already contacted Robbie and said, well, are you willing to come back on the weekend and actually talk about this issue to our weekend audience? So again, the more we do this, the more evidence we present, the more people who become interested in the mainstream media, we get the community talking, and one could say that we are the tip of the spear when it comes to some of these economic policy issues that are circling around the country.
Yeah, and I think the next month or so is going to be really critical, right? If we are to make further progress on this very important issue, it's got to be over the next month, hasn't it?
Yes, of course. So we don't know when the government's going to settle on their final piece of legislation, but before it is introduced into Parliament, it's got to go to Cabinet, it's got to go to the party room, and the party room is the opportunity for the backbench to have their vote. So when the party room meets, cabinet ministers cannot speak, they cannot vote, and it's purely a backbench vote about do they support the cabinet position or not. And so this is where it's highly important that for in terms of people watching the show, if they are against this legislation, the Nationals are being smashed in Queensland as well as in northern New South Wales. So I spoke to in the last 72 hours, 2 National MPs, one in Queensland, one in northern New South Wales. They are under significant pressure from their constituents not to support this legislation. There's this is what I was told, extreme nervousness among Nationals backbench MPs about this. And there is a discussion to be had among the Nationals as to do they fall into line with the Liberals, or do they actually try to actually stand up to the Liberals and say, well, we can't cop this in our constituencies, and you have to abandon this legislation. So again, moving forward, there definitely is a role for our viewers to play. If you do live in a regional rural area and you have a national MP, or even if in your state or territory you have a national senator, definitely apply pressure there, because that is definitely having an impact, and because these MPs are telling me directly that it is having an impact. But also in the context of Labor, there has to be more pressure applied to Labor. And one of the things I've said in recent days at some seminars, but also privately to certain people, if we are to reverse Labor's preliminary position as we understand it today, one of the things that one of the most effective ways to do that is to go directly to the leader. So the leader has the prerogative, in my view, to overrule his shadow minister. So to the extent that you can talk to other members of the shadow cabinet, the caucus, but also apply pressure onto Albanese's office, so that they know that this is a red line that even Labor can't cross. That could be an effective way to reverse the initial position of the shadow assistant treasurer, Mr. Jones.
Okay, so I guess then for our audience, ask yourself what else you can do. Who else can you speak to? Who else can you pick up the phone to? Who else can you email in terms of the political environment, right? And obviously there are senators, and those senators are state-based, as well as your local politician in the member, from a member's perspective in the lower house, right?
Yes, yeah. So a couple of tips for the audience in terms of wrapping up the show. There have been a couple of viewers who have actually contacted state MPs. I think it's important to just re-emphasise this is a federal issue with the federal parliament. So you get nothing out of contacting your state. Your whether it's New South Wales Parliament or the Queensland Parliament. I mean, it's not in their jurisdiction. So you must contact your federal MP. You must contact your federal senator, and obviously make your voice known. So that'd be point one. Obviously, we've touched on the point. Writing is important, but making a phone call, I think, is also important. And being direct and saying to them, if you vote for this, I will vote you out. I mean, look, I think particularly in marginal constituencies, any MP who wants to retain their seat, if they're hearing directly from constituents and they're saying directly this piece of legislation could cost me not voting for you, I think that will have a devastating impact on their on their position.
So just one point in terms of how do you find out who to phone, right? There are all the contact details on the parliamentary websites.
Correct.
Right? We'll put the links below again. It's very easy to find the phone number of your local member.
Yes. Right. Yes, and the one point I'll make is that I think you just said before, so the next few weeks are very critical, so I would agree with that. Obviously, if we have a Senate inquiry, I mean, this is likely to be an issue that may run for another 1 to 2 months. So the next 2 months will be the ultimate test of whether the people, our audience, the broader community, whether they are willing to stand up for their civil rights and their economic freedom and actually stop Parliament from heading towards the abyss.
Yeah. So in the interest of the people, time to rise up and make sure your views are known.
Absolutely.
Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people, we'll see you next time.